Okay. So I'm really amazed by my co-speakers. I hope that I can match up with this final presentation. Yeah. So I will speak for the first time today about my own experiences in the realm of sacred sexuality. And it's for me an interesting experiment. Maybe it's the first time that an established German academic ever does that, but I love it already now. Why do I do this? I do it for several reasons. One, I want to explore practitioner scholarship exactly in the way that Kevin does it, so I'm also radically agnostic. And I'm trying to develop a methodology for doing sense-oriented autoethnography, and I'm trying also with this to push the boundaries of academic approaches and knowledge production. And I'm trying to leave the academic comfort zone, if you like. And I also want to share some of my own experiential insights to spark a shared discourse about a topic that probably most of you are I don't know, associated with. If I may ask, who has practiced sex magic in this room? Yeah. Okay, I expected so. What about tantric approaches? Tantrism? Ah, okay. I preach to the converted. But what I noticed is that even though almost everybody, like on occasions like this, does it, no one ever talks about it in detail. And I will try to add a bit more detail today, also compared to Kevin. Let's see how that works. So I'm not going to talk about the history of sex magic, but I approach the topic from a phenomenological perspective. And this question has been on my mind for quite a while, also because I was doing fieldwork in two movements where quite opposite approaches were taken towards the issue of ejaculation. And I'm really hoping for a shared discourse, so let's talk about it. I'm interested in your feedback, insights, thoughts. Also approach me after the talk, because I think this is really an area where we can produce more good knowledge and co-produce knowledge. So this is very personal and subjective, and it's also a bit different. So I'm not an artist. I'm not a brilliant slide maker like Kevin, so my talk is a bit wordy, and the script is on the slides, but therefore I don't have to read from paper. Also, the background of this talk is that I'm interested in establishing an evidence-based study of magic, which doesn't exist yet, with or without sex magic. And as sex magic is often considered to be one of the most powerful practices, I think we could just start there if we look for effects, if you know what I mean. And yes, so sexuality is often considered to be one of the greatest powers that we have at our disposal, which I think is almost true, because I think the breath could be even more powerful. But many practitioners report great effects, and I think we could just start here if we want to build up an evidence-based study of magic. So also allow me to apologize that this talk will be rather male-centric, because this is my situation, similar to Kevin. I cannot put it in the funny words he does it, but yeah, this is my approach. This is I'm sharing my own experiences. And the topic of ejaculation is focusing on male ejaculation in this paper. So when I prepared the presentation, I did a joke with myself. I asked ChatGPT, what is sexuality? From a sexological perspective. So what has sexology contributed to our knowledge about sexuality? And this is what came out of it. So it is a complex issue because it includes biology, psychology, and culture. So it's about hormones and neurochemistry, emotions, desires, and fantasy, norms, gender roles, religion, and media, which all intermingle. That's why it's such a complex phenomenon. Younger sexological studies have shifted away from interpreting sexuality as a reproductive force and stressed selfhood, identity, intentionality, and relation. They have also shifted away from focusing on a presumed physiological drive towards psychological factors that spark sexuality, especially psychological safety, connection, communication, intimacy. And today, as you all know, sexuality is considered a social construction, and clear-cut boundaries have dissolved into much more fluid sexual identities. And especially gender studies have stressed that sexuality is, of course, shaped by gender relations, power structures, hierarchies, and patriarchy. So far, so good. Let's go a bit deeper and add a phenomenological and especially esoteric lens. So I think one thing that is interesting about sexuality is that it's both accessible and inaccessible. So usually we could say that everyone has it fairly easily at his or her disposal, but at the same time it often seems that sexuality is doing its own thing. It seems sometimes to control us rather than the other way around. And we cannot determine, usually, or decide upon our own sexual desires, fetishes, rhythms, etc. So exploring sexuality is a mixture of active engagement and passive surrendering to a mysterious force. It's also ambivalent with regard to sexuality's oscillating between feeling oneself and losing oneself in someone else, between longing and fear, vulnerability, and of course sexuality can spark immense joy, but also great pain. I would also add that from a phenomenological perspective, the sensation of lust is curious as it clearly differs from thoughts, feelings, emotions, including love, whatever that is, and other physical sensations within the body. So in the realm of introspection, we could say that lust is a thing of its own. It's a distinct energy or internal sensation. And the orgasm may be the easiest way for everyone to briefly achieve an altered state of mind without prolonged practice or training. And this is probably one of the reasons why sexuality, and especially the moment of orgasm, has become a thing in modern esotericism and magic, because it's fairly easy to access from a ritual perspective, but considered nonetheless efficacious because it's so strong and powerful. So, why did in modern magic, beginning with Pascal Beverly Randolph and other people, arise the idea that sexuality can function as a magical agent? I think one reason was that culture shifted at that time and the interpretation of sexuality. But from a phenomenological perspective, the sex drive, and especially the orgasm, appear to be more powerful than most other subject psychic phenomena. At the same time, being both accessible and uncontrollable, as I just said, and there is this general mysteriousness about sexuality and the symbolism, creating life, etc. And it's very transgressive. It crosses boundaries, prohibitions, taboos. It is tabooish, and thereby caters to the transgressive nature of magic itself and the self-understanding of many practitioners. But if there is some truth to it, so if sexuality can be ritually instrumentalized to cause change in accordance with will, we have heard so much about Crowley. How does it work? How can one direct one's sexual energies and transfer them onto a ritual objective? This is kind of the question behind this talk from a male perspective. I always approach the esoteric scene very open-minded, but also very agnostic. So there are many different claims about this. And usually I'm not so much interested in claims, but in experiences. So I did field work and also several years for the same time in two different groups where strong claims about how this works were made. And so I explored both groups from the perspective of my own experiences. So let's go. The two groups, they are called the Sweet Medicine Sundance Tribe, also known as Deer Tribe Metis Medicine Society. Who has heard of this movement? It's still, one. Okay, it's very unknown, even though it has a large German community. So this is a neo-shamanic, or we could also say a new religious neo-Amerindian group or movement that was founded in the late 1970s by a guy called Harley Swifty Reagan, who claimed to have been taught by Don Gennaro, one of the teachers of Carlos Castaneda. And the group today has, I would say, several thousand practitioners worldwide, with a few hundred in Germany. This group claims to teach traditional ceremonies derived from the esoteric branches of the former religions of the Navajo, Sioux, Hopi, Cherokee, and other Native American tribes. And they call themselves a twisted hair tradition. So they intermingle practices and ceremonies from all these different tribes. And this is probably also one of the reasons why no one of you knows of that movement, because it goes very much under the radar, because they have received heavy headwind from Native American associations for these claims. Still, the movement is extremely complex, complicated, and very fascinating from a religious studies perspective. It's initiatory. Most teachings are oral, so there are publications, but most of the knowledge you receive through years of oral teachings. And also there are different initiatory pathways, the most important being the so-called gateway path with 15 gateways, and you need 20 years to go through the first 3 or 4 gateways, so I think you need several lives to go through the whole process. Core practices in this tradition are the Sundance. This is the biggest practice they have. Then there is an eagle dance, earth lord ceremonial days, sweat lodges, pipe ceremonies, tree ceremonies, and a tradition called shamanic sexuality, or kudoshka. And I've done fieldwork in this movement for 5 years, between 2018 and 23. I've danced 1 Sundance, 2 eagle dances, and did all sorts of ceremonies. And I've also learned kudoshka in the form of 3 workshops. I'll talk more about this later. The other group I'm going to talk about today is a private tantric community in Germany, founded by a German tantric teacher. So really a traditional tantric guru whose disciple I was for 3 years, from 2021 to 2024, and it was a formal initiation through Shaktipat, energy transfer, and swearing an oath and so on. This group, the Ardharatra Kaula, Ardharatra means midnight, because we always meet and we want to start the ritual, let's say at 1 p.m., but we start at 11 p.m. and then we have to practice during night, so we called it Midnight Kaula. It practices what it understands, or what the teacher says or understands as traditional tantra. So it distances itself from neo-tantra with massages and sexual therapy and all these things, but it is inspired by Sri Vidya, a South Indian tantric tradition, various other influences, among them Bivolaru and Andro, the Berlin founder of the tantric school in Berlin. Diamond Lotus, thank you. This tantric training involves 3 pillars. One is a daily yoga sadhana, so you practice yoga every day. You practice meditation every day, a specific meditation called Laya meditation, where you focus on very high frequencies. And the third pillar involves erotic tantra, multiple different techniques, which I will explain later. But the goal of this practice is really the dissolution of the attachment to one's narrative self, which is here understood as awakening, and the rise of Kundalini Sushumna Shakti beyond Ajna into Sahasrara, which is understood as enlightenment. And awakening and enlightenment are 2 different processes here. I've participated in multiple group rituals based on variations of Maituna, the unification ritual, combined with mantras, yantras, bandhas, mudras, pranayamas, and other tantric techniques. So this is quite complicated stuff, including initiations into Laya yoga before the meetings and so on. I will explain a bit more what this entails soon. But first I want to map out these 2 quite different understandings of sexuality in these 2 groups. In the Kudoshka system, the shamanic system of sexuality, it is all about the polarity and the sacred marriage, what they call it, of the male and female energies. And they even interpret Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, as a unification of male and female energies. And many prayers begin with the formulation, everything is born of woman, the passive, the receptive, and sparked by man, the active and expansive. So the whole movement is really about polarity between male and female, and sexual energy comes into play through Chuluaqui, which is the general life force, and the way it manifests as sexual energy is called Orende in this tradition. And therefore, sexuality in this shamanic tradition lies at the center of the human condition. It is related to the so-called fifth element, which corresponds to the void and the soul. And they map everything onto cardinal directions. You see it here. So earth is west, wind is north, water is south, and fire is east, and sexuality is in the center, and it corresponds to the soul, to the soul emptiness. What did just happen? Okay, and here you see another image where they try to map these two different principles. So the core goal of Kudoshka, sacred sexuality in the shamanic movement, is liberating and healing one's sexuality, and the assumption is that this leads to an overall increase in life quality and intensity, and also in a greater ability to live one's sacred dream, the dream of the Hokshide, the higher self. So once you've liberated your sexuality, many things will change, and you will come closer and closer to your holy dream, we could say. And Kudoshka provides all sorts of tools to do that, to liberate your sexuality. For instance, to identify 8 so-called lovers' masks, and they also have a system of 8 different types of penises and vulvas, and you can identify your own type and then find out the specifics of your own physical prerequisites, if you like. And there's also a system of different types of orgasms and so on. And there are many, many practices also, but the most important one is called heart pleasuring exercise, allegedly taught by one of Swiftia's Cherokee grandmothers. This led to a furious response by the Cherokee Association, but that's a side topic. So the idea of this practice is while stimulating yourself, you pull up the sexual energy called Orende. They also use the term chakra, allegedly corresponding to a Amerindian term, which is an energy wheel through the breath and the PC muscles, and then you end up in the heart. So here is an image of the 8 vulva types, and there are extensive explanation for what each vulva type entails. And here you have the corresponding types of the penises. And interestingly, you can find out a lot about yourself, where your limitations and potentialities lie, but also with a partner, because some of these match and others don't. So this is just a citation from the moment of orgasm in the heart pleasuring exercise. And the point here is, the minute you hit that orgasmic peak, take a breath, breathe deeply. You want to let the feelings leave your heart. Don't hold them there. Let your eyes roll back. Let your body go into its natural arch. Let that wave of orgasm and sound take you out of your body. And this is related to a concept of release, which is very crucial to the shamanic understanding of sexuality. It's all about a dialectic between building up the sexual energy and then releasing the energy. Now, this idea of sexuality in the Kaula is very different. The main inspiration is from Sri Vidya, which is a form of non-dual Shaiva Shakta Tantra tradition, which focuses on the female mother, the Devi, as the highest reality. So the Devi is worshipped, and sometimes she is depicted in the form of 10 manifestations, so-called Mahavidyas, but Sri Vidya often focuses on Tripura Sundari, which is one of these 10 deities. Shakti and Shiva represent the manifested cosmos, which is Shakti, and Shiva represents the all-encompassing consciousness, and both emerged from a unified source, the Parabrahman, which created both aspects through self-reflection and gradual self-unfolding. This is what the Shri Chakra or Shri Yantra is about, which you may have seen. Human beings mirror this process of cosmic creation and polarization, because Shakti is represented in all the appearances. So our own body, also my male body, is an aspect of Shakti, the female, the female principle. all the emotions, sensations, energetic phenomena, sexuality, and ultimately Kundalini Shakti, the spark of creation, which resides usually asleep and enrolled at the lower spine. This is all Shakti. And Shiva is represented through our consciousness, that is our main basic awareness, which witnesses all these manifestations. So this is the Shri Yantra, it's very complex. From a practical tantric perspective, sexual desire represents at its root the primordial longing between Shakti and Shiva, between energy and consciousness. And therefore, sexual desire can be instrumentalized to activate Kundalini Shakti and stir her to rise through Sushumna Nadi, towards Sahasrara, where she strives to reunite with Shiva consciousness. This represents our built-in polarity in our sexual desire, because when we feel attracted to someone, this is, we could say, the projection of one of these two aspects. And this is basically used to as a tool to spark a spiritual process of convergence between our own energy and our own consciousness. And from a ritual perspective, this is done through the male partner fully identifying with Shiva and the female partner with Shakti. So Shiva provides the field of consciousness in which Shakti can dance and manifest lust. Lust is energy. And the emotional polarity which you try to activate during the ritual is that between worship and veneration, which is the Shiva part, and devotion and surrender, which is the Shakti part. In an ideal scenario, both partners are able to activate their respective Kundalini Shaktis through ritual identification with Shiva and Shakti, a process called transfiguration. And both Kundalinis then connect and rise through the chakras of both bodies, which is a specific movement, towards Sahasrara, where both might experience Samadhi, a state of blissful non-duality, Satchitananda. So the tantric lineage into which I'm initiated belongs to Vamachara. It's a form of left-hand practice. So erotic desires and sexuality are not circumvented or fully sublimated. I will explain what sublimation is. Because there are also tantric traditions, like some Nat traditions, where sexuality is not practiced. But in my case, these are deliberately used practically with physical partners in order to achieve enlightenment faster. So the idea of all Tantra is that it's faster than other traditions, other spiritual paths, because one works with the primordial forces that underlie all creation. The function of male ejaculation. So in Kudoshka practice, the orgasm is a crucial moment. It can heal wounds, help us feel whole and reconnect us with all life. And then they also developed a system of orgasms. And for the male practitioner, there are 4 types, which depend on whether you have an erection or not, and whether you ejaculate or not. And when you map these 4 types onto each other, you have 4 types of orgasms, where 2 are connected to ejaculation and 2 are not. But be this as it may, in Kodoshka sex magic, the man always has to ejaculate. Because discharge is so important. The argument is when we have an orgasm, we discharge or release the energy we have built up. And the more energy, the more energy you have built up, the more powerful the discharge or the release is, which will have then a magical effect. And based on this theory, I've practiced a so-called personal sex magic ceremony several times with a then partner in 2020, I think, or 2021. And this ceremony involved full ejaculation for the man, and thereafter manipulation of the what Crowley called elixir of life. So this ritual was long and complicated. I will only briefly map the most important details. So there were a lot of paraphernalia. We used elemental basins, candles in different colors, wine glasses, and wine, red and white wine, colored paper triangles, stones. So we made a ritual circle around the bed. And then you define personal prayers where you note down your intention for the ritual, cleansing of body and room, multiple invocation of Amerindian deities, male and female ones, Then multiple evocations, elements, directions, and so on, so forth, and then where predefined prayer formula and personal prayers. I'm not allowed to undisclose the ritual script here. These are only the basic elements. And then you make love. In the script, this is a very short sentence. So you just make love, and you focus on the intention during the orgasm. Then you put the fluids out of the womb into a chalice. You manipulate the fluids in combination with the paper triangles and the red and the white wine. And then you bring the sacred mixture to a tree. So sweet medicine is all about trees, because trees are a direct connection to Wakantanka for some reason. And then give it away, let it be done, don't think about it again. So I think many of you will have done variations of this, I presume. Yeah. And what I found funny when I learned this was that the Kudoshka teacher, he was rambling about tantric practitioners who sit in caves and sublimate the energy for years. So he was really polemical about the opposite approach, which I will explain now. Because in the Ardharatra Kaula, the interpretation of male ejaculation is very different. And also, my guru, he was also polemicizing about male practitioners who would ejaculate, because he thinks it's quite idiotic to do that, because you simply spill out the energy in Svadhisthana and then it's gone. So why would you do that? In this path, the ejaculation is, or what is called the release orgasm, is avoided on principle. So what does this mean? For the male practitioner, a core practice is so-called ejaculation control, and my teacher called this Energiesparvertrag. So in Germany, you know, all the older generation was obsessed about Bausparvertrag, so you build up money over time to build a house, and my teacher called this Energiesparvertrag. I practice this practice since 2021. It involves a daily sadhana of complementary yogic practices, especially Mulband, Uddiyana Band, Uddara Band, prolonged headstand, and further sublimation practices such as Yoni and Vajroli Mudra. Because, so the key concept is here sublimation, because you cannot practice ejaculation control for a prolonged time, because the sexual energy would just build up in Svadhisthana and you would be horny all the time and overflown with sexual energy. This is not the point. The point is to sublimate the energy through these practices. Especially the bandhas, the muscle contraction techniques, but also mantras and mudras, they aim at pulling up the sexual energy into the upper chakras, whereas the amount of energy stays the same, but it changes its frequency, so it vibrates higher, and therefore it feels different when you're actually able to sublimate the sexual energy. And therefore it also loses its subjective appearance as lust. Next to sublimation techniques, the Kaula works with canalization and projection techniques. So the energy is projected towards predefined intentions called sankalpa, usually through mantras and yantras, especially a mantra called canalization mantra. This is trained extensively and individually over weeks and months in front of a mirror with 3 mantras, the so-called observation mantra, the control mantra, and the canalization mantra. And the goal for the male practitioner is to never ejaculate, but to stay at 80% of arousal. And in this tradition, the idea is that a woman has a huge basin in her lower belly, which is the chalice, the amount of sexual energy you can hold, but the man starts with an Untertasse, a tea. Yeah. So the man at the beginning can hold much less sexual energy, but through this practice, it is as if you put like layers of clay, so that gradually you also build up a basin, which is necessary for having prolonged rituals, which can sometimes take on the whole night. And these same techniques, bandhas, mantras, yantras, and mudras, they are used during the Maithuna practice. The principle for the man is to never ejaculate, and if he would do it, the ritual would be over. I've never experienced that this would happen. And if the man does that, Shakti can relax and manifest the energy, which is her own lust, during the ritual, and this can then be used for all sorts of purposes, sublimation, manifestation of deities or abstract archetypal principles, tantric principles, activation of Kundalini Shakti, inviting her to rise and striving for states of samadhi. So, I'm trying to do very much in this presentation, but I'm at the end of my talk almost. Some personal reflections and then a brief conclusion. So this was the theory. In reality, I noticed that working with sexuality is always messy and still somewhat uncontrollable, even if you garnish it with long training and rigid ritualizations. And as I said, I've practiced both types. I've wondered about the effects, and I was also amused that both teachers polemicize against each other. So the following comparison is subjective. So what did I learn? I had intense experiences in both traditions. I do not remember any obvious experience of evidence that any of these intentions or sankalpas would have come true. Sorry. So I don't even remember some of the intentions that were used. Usually the intentions with my partners, they were more personal and private, but in the Kaula we often had big political goals, which obviously did never happen because we live in a shithole. So, in the area of fulfilled ritual goals, I have not much to say. But when it comes to controlling energy, I did have several profound experiences. When I began the tantric solo ritual and learned the mantras, I was struck to see that after having bathed in seas of lust, so you masturbate for 30 minutes, at 80% this is really quite intense, but then you utter a mantra and 10 seconds later there is nothing. Nothing remains, the lust has completely disappeared. This is a very fascinating experience. For me also personally, ejaculation control was a game changer on multiple levels. It fundamentally changes the flow of the energy, the life feeling and much more. It's of course also very demanding because you have much more energy at your disposal, but therefore you have to practice these tantric techniques. I fully disagree with the shamanic claim that a release orgasm does not lead to an energy loss. I think this is simply not true. It seems also evident from my experience that it is possible for man to gradually enlarge the chalice of or capacity to hold sexual energy and eventually have energetic orgasms. So I think the sublimation techniques that I learned in the tantric part, they work. It is possible to change the frequency of sexual energy, pull it upwards, and use it for other purposes, including spiritual ones. This is called ojas, when you sublimate the sexual energy. And it's also possible to use sexual energies to explore hidden aspects of the personality, so to do shadow work. So I've done this in both with shamanic and tantric techniques, and I think both work very effectively to spark very deep inner insights and visionary experiences. I've had multiple manifestations of Kundalini Shakti in the tantric practices in different ways, especially shivering of the body and so on, but not during the Kodoshka practices. I've not experienced the rise of Kundalini Shakti into the upper chakras and samadhi, neither during solo or partner exercises, but this may be related to my own blockages. But I did experience prolonged states of bliss and timelessness. What to conclude? So it may have become obvious that I prefer the tantric practices compared to the shamanic ones. I find them more profound. I had more experiences of evidence, so this system seems to work for me, and it changed my life in good, profound ways. So I've stayed with tantric practices, but I dropped eventually the shamanic ones with a few small exceptions. And I think tantric sublimation and canalization practices, they are a real thing and continue to impress me, but I fully respect the experiences of many practitioners who have worked with ejaculation in one way or the other and reported profound effects with regard to manifesting external goals, but I still wonder what the mechanism would be. So who is the magical agent? I like very much your theory, Kevin, but still there are questions. My intention with this presentation was, apart from speaking truthfully about my own experiences, to spark a shared discourse about this. And I would really appreciate if more advanced practitioners would come out of the closet and share more personal experiences about these touchy subjects. So let's co-create knowledge and work towards a better understanding of this fascinating phenomenon. And RANSEP, it's not a sex cult, RANSEP, but it can be a playground where we exchange ideas about these topics. And I also think that human civilization is not in a good shape, and working towards enhanced peace in the realm of gender and sexuality is, in my humble opinion, crucial for improving the situation. So I think more knowledge might facilitate individuals to develop and integrate their sexuality instead of using it harmfully against themselves or others. May peace between the genders, möge Frieden zwischen den Geschlechtern sein. Thank you for your attention.